Introducing a glorious name for a glorious new automobile. The 1992 Buick Roadmaster.
Back in 1936, Buick first introduced the name Roadmaster on its largest and most luxurious cars. Although it went through 7 generations up through 1958, it was its rebirth in 1991 on GM's full-size body-on-frame B platform that is the most well-known Roadmaster today. Although it was usually despised by the younger generation when new for being the epitome of Grandpa's car, hidden under the hood starting in 1994 was a Corvette LT1 V8. Although in a Buick that engine wasn't tuned to be a sports car, it allowed for upgrades that made it the sleeper hit of the decade. This is the story of the Buick Roadmaster.
Alex!
This is my old car.
What's up with your dad? Since we got Rhapsody on Verizon Wireless, I get all my favorite music. Unfortunately, my dad gets his favorites too.
Alexander Garrett, why don't you answer your dad?
So does my mom.
I was weird at that age too.
Although the Roadmaster is a nameplate that goes back to before World War II, most of this episode will be focusing on the 1990s version, in which Buick tried to rekindle the love of old-school full-size luxury at a time when minivans and SUVs were far more popular.
And with this luxury of the vinyl fake wood paneling, it lets everybody know I'm classy.
Buick wasn't alone in this venture, as Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, and of course Cadillac had their versions as well, although the latter's Fleetwood was even longer, and as such was reclassified as the D-body. Before I continue, click on the link in the description below from today's sponsor, Lasfit, to help support my channel. Lasfit are makers of replacement LED lighting, all-weather floor mats, and truck bed liners. Lasfit sent me a set of their LED headlamps to try installing in my 2000 Plymouth Prowler, which had its original 24-year-old halogen bulbs. These old bulbs had a dull yellow color and didn't project light all that well. I often avoided driving my Prowler at night due to how poorly it lit up the road, but because of the car's age, I didn't think I could find a suitable replacement. But the Lasfit site made it easy to locate new LED bulbs that would fit, even for a low production car like mine. These new LED bulbs are not just for better vision at night, but also to be seen by others in poor weather, as I experienced on a recent trip during a rainstorm with the new bulbs installed. Despite the age of my old bulbs, the new LED replacements have the same exact fitting, allowing them to simply plug in the same way. Just enter your car's year, make, and model to find a matching set. Lasfit also sells replacement turn signals, tail lamps, and even interior lights, and they also sell custom-fit all-weather floor mats and truck liners, so check out their site to learn more. Click on the link in the description below, or go to www.lasfit.com to find new LED lighting, floor mats, and truck liners for your car or truck. The original Roadmaster in 1936 offered both hardtops and convertibles, or a combination of both, with their Town Car series with a glass partition separating the open-top driver's compartment from the fully enclosed rear. As was typical for the time, model generations only lasted 2 or 3 years, with the only exception being the 4th gen that was put on hold like all other cars during the war. In 1947, the Roadmaster took on its now classic large tooth grille.
You don't have to go to Cincinnati to get a pair of underwear at Kmart. You have to go to Kmart, 400 Oak Street.
And offered a wagon model, the Roadmaster Estate, with real wood on the doors. Only 300 of the Estates were built that year, making it quite possibly the most valuable Roadmaster if you can find it. By 1947 and 1948, the Roadmaster sold nearly 80,000 units each year.
Feel a little more relaxed in your favorite Kmart clothes?
Tell him, Ray. Kmart sucks.
In the 1950s, the Roadmaster would offer variants such as the Roadmaster Riviera and the Roadmaster Skylark, names that would later become their own standalone models. The Roadmaster name was relegated to history following its last model year of 1958, when only 14,000 were sold that year. Fast forward to the 1990s, and Buick's lineup had drastically changed as compared to the 1950s, with much smaller cars in their lineup, such as the compact Skylark and the Riata Roadster. These small models were Buick's attempt to capture more youthful buyers, something Buick desperately needed to remain competitive. And yet, in 1991, they also decided to bring back the Roadmaster name on GM's newly updated full-size B-body platform. This platform first originated in 1926 and went through 10 different redesigns over the following decades, but remained rear-wheel drive and body-on-frame during all of those redesigns. Despite the significant downsizing across the entire GM line beginning in 1977, the final upgrade to the B-body for 1991 did the unexpected by adding several inches to the overall length.
The 1992 Roadmaster Limited Sedan.
Its rear-drive body-on-frame architecture had been abandoned by nearly every other car on the market. Only Ford's Panther platform would continue beyond the life of the GM B-body.
The great characteristics of Roadmaster's quality have been reshaped with contemporary styling and
You ever seen a grown man naked?
The last B-body platform produced 3 models that had a styling which was, to put it mildly, controversial. Bob Stempel, who took over as CEO in 1991, following the tumultuous era of Roger Smith, didn't want GM to keep building big rear-drive cars, but the project had already progressed too far by the start of Stempel's tenure to prevent it. The 90s was a decade of car design that saw each of the automakers trying to distance themselves from the extremely boxy styles of the late 70s and most of the 80s, which by the 90s started to look very dated. However, in the case of the B-body, GM seemed to overcorrect and went full bubble car. Oldsmobile had the shortest run of the B-body, using it only for the custom cruiser wagon, which sold so poorly that they were discontinued by 1992. The biggest seller by far was the Chevy Caprice, but that was because of taxi and police sales, as civilian versions were not nearly as popular. The Caprice had some police forces, who used black and white color schemes for their cars, referred to it as Shamu. Yes, the name of the black and white orca whale that performed at SeaWorld back in the day.
Wow, I wish I could speak whale.
I don't think they were far off on that opinion, which is why I named the 90s Caprice number 1 in my Weird GM Cars episode. However, Buick had more initial luck with their take on the new B-body, the Roadmaster, maybe because they made no attempt to disguise who this car was being marketed to. Buick's core buyers still skewed older and wanted luxury, but not at the price point of Cadillac luxury. I've always considered Buick buyers to be those who probably would prefer a Cadillac, but couldn't afford it. Adding the Roadmaster to the Buick lineup effectively dethroned their former flagship model, the Park Avenue, which I suspect displeased some Park Avenue owners. By the start of the 90s, the dominant family vehicle was the minivan, and SUVs were gaining in popularity, at the expense of what was once a dominant people mover, the full-size station wagon. Yet despite this, when the latest incarnation of the B-body debuted for 1991, Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, and Buick all offered a wagon, complete with the fake wood sides as standard. Although for the latter, you could opt out for no fake wood as a lower cost option. In fact, when the Roadmaster first debuted for 1991, you could only get the wagon. It wasn't until 1992 that the Roadmaster sedan was added to the lineup. Inside, the Roadmaster took you back to your childhood with a large front bench seat, a long straight dashboard that went from pillar to pillar, and of course, more fake wood grain. Above the second row was the Vista roof, effectively a bubble-top sunroof. The sedan's trunk was huge, enough to hold 3 or maybe even 4 sets of golf clubs, the latter if you remove the full-size spare tire. From the outside, the Roadmaster sedan's more squared-off rear roofline did share a considerable resemblance to the Cadillac Fleetwood. However, the Cadillac was 9 inches longer overall, and 6 inches longer in wheelbase. Not that the Roadmaster was short, as it was still nearly 18 feet long. Making it seem even longer were the rear wheel side skirts that had long since gone out of automotive fashion, another clear example of the buyer Buick was trying to attract. But it was a station wagon option where GM felt it had an advantage, as by 1991, both Ford and Chrysler wouldn't have any full-size wagons to compete with. The wagon version of the Ford Crown Victoria had its last year at the same time the GM B-body wagon started, whereas Chrysler's Town & Country had its last iteration as a full-size wagon in 1977. Chrysler still offered smaller wagons up through 1988, phasing them out in favor of their far more popular minivans. Ford continued a wagon option with the mid-size Taurus and Sable into the 1990s, but their smaller size meant they would never directly compete with GM. The Roadmaster wagon offered features that their competitors simply couldn't have due to their smaller size, such as the rear-facing third-row seat, and the rear door that could swing out or down. But the biggest advantage, or disadvantage depending on your concern for fuel economy, was under the hood. It was the Corvette's V8 in particular, where the Roadmaster would gain an advantage that no one could see from the outside. To be clear, it was not as if the Corvette's V8 was fitted directly into the Roadmaster, although there certainly was enough room for it, and it would take a few years into the Roadmaster's production before anything close to a Corvette engine made it in. At its launch in 1991, the Roadmaster's base engine was a 5-liter V8, codenamed the L03, that only made 170 horsepower. For a vehicle that could weigh as much as 4,700 pounds in wagon form, that was dangerously slow. By 1992, the V8 was upgraded to the L05, a 5.7-liter V8, which only gained an additional 10 horses. Each of these engines managed at best 25 miles per gallon on the highway, a rating that only a decade earlier would have been very hard to sell. But the fuel crisis was not nearly as bad in the 90s, and big engine displacement started to make a comeback. With only the wagon available for sale in 1991, Buick only managed to sell just over 6,700 of them. However, for 1992, when the sedan joined the lineup, Buick sold nearly 60,000 sedans and just over 11,000 wagons, making the 92 model year the best-selling by far for this final generation of the Roadmaster.
The 1992 Roadmaster sedan is big. It's almost 216 inches long and weighs over 4,000 pounds.
This is impressive when you consider the Roadmaster only had a 180 horsepower V8 and relatively poor fuel economy. But for 1993, sales dipped to just over 38,300, of which around 9,500 were wagons. This drop in sales prompted Buick to make some changes for 1994. The 94 model had some ergonomic improvements made to the dashboard and added an airbag for the front passenger, but the biggest change was under the hood, now with the 5.7-liter LT1 V8, making 260 horsepower. Yes, the C4 Corvette, starting in 1992, also had the LT1, but the Corvette's aluminum heads were changed to iron in the Buick for improved durability and more low-end torque. There were also intake silencers to decrease engine noise. Considering the Roadmaster's tires were not built for racing, the LT1 in the Roadmaster was electronically limited to just 108 miles per hour. The LT1 also allowed the Roadmaster sedan to have a tow rating of 5,000 pounds, and the wagon offered an upgraded towing package that allowed it to tow up to 7,000 pounds. Although most owners of boats and trailers had switched to SUVs, the LT1 engine allowed Buick to still capture a small chunk of that market. Despite these advantages, sales of the Roadmaster dropped by 2,400 units for 1994 as compared to 93. Some of the decrease in sales for the Roadmaster in 1994 could be attributed to Chevrolet's release of the Impala SS that same year. In fact, the upgrade to the LT1 in the Buick may not have happened had it not been for the Impala SS, as it allowed a cost savings to keep the same basic engine platform across all B-body models. Large sedans with powerful engines were still a niche market, but the Impala definitely moved the focus of big sedans to Chevrolet, although still retaining the overall Shamu look from the Caprice. The rear wheels were no longer partially hidden on the Chevrolet, whereas this remained on the Roadmaster, giving the latter a larger feel than the Impala. And speaking of wheels, they could still be fitted with white wall tires. Yes, the little strip of white wall was far smaller than its heyday of the 1940s and 50s, but it was still there. Roadmaster sales for 1995 dropped again, and it was clear that Buick's sedan portfolio was simply too big for a car market that was trending more towards the minivan and SUV. Sales of the Chevy Caprice and Impala were also slipping, and GM was eager to eliminate what was essentially a dinosaur in the car market, that being rear-drive body-on-frame, leaving Ford's Panther platform to be the last one to soldier on in that same setup for the next 15 years. 1996 would be the Roadmaster's final year, and surprisingly, the wagon sales increased from the prior year, selling nearly 9,000 units. I suspect that may have been from buyers who didn't want SUVs and minivans, and who knew it would be their last chance to own a big wagon. During the early 2000s, seeing a Roadmaster on the road may have been something to laugh at and make fun of. At least I know I did. But today, nearly 3 decades after they last left new car showrooms, seeing one of these behemoths on the road now is a rare treat, especially the Woody wagons. Anyone who still owns one should seriously consider going to their local car shows, as they would now be loved and appreciated by those of us who once mocked them. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you once owned a car from the 70s to mid-2000s that you rarely see today and would like it featured in a future episode, leave a reply in the comments or contact me at the email shown here. See you next time.
I don't have my underwear.
What?
I'm definitely not wearing my underwear.
What are you talking about? I gave you a fresh pair of mine this morning.
No, not my underwear.
I told you to go in the bathroom and put them on. Where are they?
Of course, they're in the pocket of my jacket.
Where?
Here. These are too tight.
I don't want them back, Craig.
These are not boxer shorts. Mine are boxer shorts.
Well, what's the difference?
These are Hanes
Underwear is
32.
underwear.